Welcome to the Primal Training podcast. I'm your host, Mamoun Benani, a holistic fitness and nutrition coach. The goal of this podcast is to bring ancestral wisdom to the modern world by sharing insightful conversations with experts in movement, nutrition, and spirituality. I really hope to provide practical strategies to enhance your lives. Enjoy. It's working. I got you in.
Awesome. Hi,
Hey,
how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing well, thank you. Thanks for
Yeah.
having me on today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, looking forward to it. I know you were a little bit nervous about the setup. Where do I click in? But you got it. We got
I
in.
feel, I feel like with the history and the holistic health, I'm always focused on like the body and the subtle energies, and the tech stuff sometimes escapes me. So thank you
Yeah.
for being patient with me. It was easier than I imagined.
Yeah. So simple. Well, yeah,
Yeah.
I'm super happy to have you in today and chat a little bit about what you do and share with other people the kind of stuff that you do as well. So you're a holistic practitioner. You have a background in different arts. I've seen like dance, piano. I just kind of want to know like a little bit of background, what brought you to holistic health and why have you decided to do it?
Sure. Okay. So I think it comes from a really young age, actually. My grandmother was diagnosed with some weird gut issues, but,
Hmm.
like 50, 60 years ago when no one knew about the microbiome or any of these things.
Yeah.
And so I think it started there where she was making food adaptations to accommodate her gut imbalance.
Hmm.
And that kind of translated down the line to my mom and then to us. So we've always been kind of a food healing family, sort of focused on food healing. Food
Hmm.
as the first source of medicine.
Okay.
Um, and so from a young kid, I was really interested in it. And, I was really fortunate. My mom had me in a lot of activities as a kid. So my aunt owned a dance studio, so I started dancing very young. I got into gymnastics really young. So I had this really physical, kinesthetic intelligence from a young kid.
Hmm.
And then my father was a gym teacher, actually. And he was a coach. He used to train track and field and swimming and diving. So he always had me doing stuff, and he had me in the gym at a young age. So I
Hmm.
immediately fell in love with and understood sort of the connection between the food aspects and the movement aspects of making a healthy human, right?
Hmm.
And that passion really stuck with me. But it's been a journey with a lot of mistakes. I can
Yeah.
assure you that, and a lot of ups and downs. So when I was about 16, I started to develop my own really bad digestive issues.
Hmm.
I'd say by the time I got to college, it was like almost unbearable sometimes, really debilitating. And
Hmm.
in fact, I was a dancer, but it really like just stunted my dance career, actually. It prevented me from really developing that side of my passion. There would be days where my gut would blow up like the size of a basketball, and I was like so embarrassed to leave my house, and I was so uncomfortable, and it just sparked so much depression and anxiety and just a lot of like sense of worthlessness.
Hmm.
And so from going from this, the earlier part of my life, I was so focused on the physicality and physical strength and muscular development and what am I eating and how am I moving. And in the second part of my life thus far, it's transitioned more into an emotional journey and a kind of psycho-spiritual journey of like, what are the beliefs that may be impacting some of this? And, what are some of those self-limiting actions and self-sabotaging behaviors that you're not owning up to that could be impacting your health? And so I'd say the second half of my journey so far has been trying to combine all of that knowledge. I don't know
Hmm.
if that answered your question, but
Yeah, it does. It does. And what was really the trigger points really into when you thought that like you've been studying the physicality of things and like trying to rationalize about like everything that's happening, but like what was that one thing that you said, okay, I might not have all the answers with all,
Mhm.
I mean, science like also like mentally science, but what I mean like with the physicality of things, like what's that one thing?
What was the thing that shifted it from sort of like a casual interest into more of a career choice? Is that what you're kind of asking me?
What I mean is, so you started having this interest in the psychological aspect of or the psychological impact on your body and on the physicality. And was there something that like triggered this interest and gave you this kind of intuition on something like that you won't have answers just with the physicality of things?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say like my senior year in college was like I could barely leave the house for a whole year. This abdominal issue was so bad, the digestive issues were so bad, and I really saw, I mean, it's impossible to avoid that connection between psychological depression and lack of motivation and a feeling of being sort of not having value in the world when you can't leave your bed, you know? And at the time, I thought I was being healthy, you know? But when I look back, you know, I was probably doing some kind of fad diet at the time that wasn't necessarily feeding the good microbes and wasn't creating balance and wasn't clearing the lymphatic system well. And I was also a chronic over-exerciser. And for people with things like IBS and a lot of digestive stuff, sometimes the body can't handle it, you know? Like I used to do like abs for like an hour straight, you know, it was just the worst thing probably for someone. It just like stifles the organ movement, right? It stifles peristalsis. So, so that was really the driver. And then I didn't really start to find answers though for probably 3 or 4 years after that when I went back to massage school. So I didn't go back to massage school until I was about 24 or 25. And I went to Swedish Institute here in New York City. And their program is a real combination of Western and Eastern influence. So we don't just learn the Western modalities, we learn a lot about traditional Chinese medicine. And so for me, that was like the bing, 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 because now you're talking a totally different language. And that ancient Chinese philosophy, I mean, it brings in this idea of 5 elements. I think you had someone on a couple of months ago that was talking about this.
Matt.
Yeah. So, you know, it brings in this idea of our symbiotic relationship with the environment and the universe and our natural surroundings and how we play our role in that. You know, it's not a human-centric philosophy. You know, it's like we're all playing our part and there's a real give and take between the natural world and the human world. And so I just fell in love with that philosophy and I immediately started to understand that connection more profoundly. And then when it's based in thousands and thousands of years of wisdom, you say, oh, wow, there's really something to this, you know? Like there's just so many millennia of anecdotal evidence, you know, you don't need that scientific, you know, your scientific brain can shut down a little bit because, you know, people have been following this philosophy and getting amazing benefit from it for so long. So I think that was the real final official introduction into this concept, even if I was feeling it internally before that.
Yeah. Well, that's super interesting, and also like integrating this Eastern medicine or philosophy with what we have here, like the study that you did is actually like integrating both can be life changing, and more people are integrating and not like because I find that we've been really dogmatic for the longest time, and even today people are really dogmatic. Okay, I have this like one cure coming from India or from China that's gonna help you with everything, and then you have other doctors and people that are more like left brain. We have the solution. You shouldn't be looking anywhere else, but you can work them together, and can have a lot of benefits.
A ton of benefits.
Yeah.
I mean, I think optimal benefit, right?
Yeah.
Like you said, I mean, I'm sure you've gone through it too, and I know I've been guilty of being too dogmatic at periods in my life, right?
Yeah.
And I know sometimes it's like you're always following that next shiny ball, right? You want to know like this thing, and then you want to know that thing. And I know I classically, when I take on new information, sometimes I forget in the initial stages to combine it with the past wisdom that I have. Sometimes I take on that new dogma and I say, oh my God, how could I believe anything that I thought before? This is the way, you know? So I've definitely been guilty of that. And I think the wisdom that I've gained thus far in my life is to not throw away the old knowledge and to realize like everything comes back, and every modality you've ever learned or technique you've ever learned or anything you've ever studied, each piece plays a part. Each piece plays a role in your life. And maybe it's not initially so obvious right in the moment, but it always comes back eventually. And you start to draw deeper connections, you know, and deeper understanding. So that's what
Exactly.
I love about continuing to study these different things and trying to avoid becoming too dogmatic. You
Yeah.
know, in the world now, it's like, well, we know about epigenetics, but it's like each person is such an individual, right? There's so much bio-individuality when it comes to your health, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's so many, it's so multifaceted, so multifactorial. What is affecting each human being uniquely and individually, right?
Mm-hmm.
My immediate environment, what I'm eating, but also an orange grown in, you know, Florida might be different than an orange grown in Sicily. The nutritional value may be completely different. So what's
Mm-hmm.
the content of the food that you're taking in? What is the water purity that you're taking in? How's the air quality where you live? What are your emotional relationships like? Do you have community support or do you feel alone? And then we've talked about like the internal stuff, the microbiome types of issues, and just the genes that you're passed down to. They still play a role, whether they're turned on or not is a different situation. You know, I just think it's so interesting, this bio-individuality. And I think it's really
Yeah.
important for people to realize that, you know, as I teach more and more things, I have a lot of people ask me the question, will this work for this? Will this work for this? You know,
Yeah.
I have these symptoms, will this work for this? And I think you already kind of mentioned this before. There's like a real tendency, I think, sometimes for holistic practitioners to fall into that trap of that modern medical model of like, well, these are the symptoms, let's treat it with this. And it's
Mm-hmm.
not that linear, you know, like holistic health is not linear like that. It's very circular and it requires experimentation. And what I tell people now is like setting the environment for healing is the most important thing you can do for yourself. And the modality and the practitioner almost become irrelevant. The fact that you've decided to pay attention to the symptoms that are affecting you and that you've finally taken a few moments to just sit down and be with yourself and be internal with the issue is 90% of the battle. The fact that you
Oh
can finally
yeah.
acknowledge that something is happening, you're already treating it, you know?
Yeah. You can't fix
Um,
something. You can't fix something that you don't believe that it exists in the first place.
right,
Yeah.
right, exactly. Yeah, so that's, you know, again, this comes from years and years of practicing with a lot of different people and playing around with a lot of different modalities.
Mm-hmm.
And in some ways, I feel like the more I know, the less I know. You know, like
Yeah.
it's like anything is possible. That's what it is,
Yeah.
you know?
And
And
also,
also,
yeah.
yeah, go
Yeah.
ahead.
Sorry. Please go ahead.
And also, it's like you're an ever evolving creature, right? So something that resonated with me 10 years ago might not even have any effect on me now. You know, it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
call to me anymore, and it's not, it doesn't feel healing in the same way that it used to, right? And
Yeah.
so your healing habits evolve as you evolve through life,
Oh
I think.
yeah. That speaks my language, 100%. Yeah. Well, and but also it's funny because like speaking of dogma, I've always seen it as something like negative and we should avoid it at all costs. Uh, but I think it's important, especially when you learn something new, you learn a new discipline, you need to be really disciplined and like
Mm.
applying it 100% and like following it. And and I see a lot of like I see this pattern a lot of times. People learning
Mhm.
something new, a new sport, a new technique, massage technique, whatever it is, they go 100%. This is gonna help with everything. And as like the more they go learning about this new thing, they realize that it's as good as all other things they've learned before, and you start to accumulate like or like you read a new book. It happens to me a lot of times. Like I've read a lot of books, and whenever I'm like super excited about this new book, and I'll be reading, I was like, I just read that like 50 times in other books, and it's like always the same thing that happens over and over.
Mhm.
But first, you need to think that if you want to open your heart to this new thing that you're going to learn, you need
Yeah.
to think that it's worthwhile, and you need to think that it's a good that it has benefits and it's gonna work. Otherwise, you won't be able to be open
Right.
in the beginning. So
Yeah.
you start by being dogmatic, and then you realize it's all the same, and then you just integrate it with all the other things, and it's like a never-ending cycle. That's like my personal opinion.
100%, I actually agree with you. And I think it is important, right? So if you're going to learn a new modality, you do have to own it to a certain extent, right? And you can
Mm-hmm.
only own it by practicing it. And it's like, once you have the foundational principles down and you've practiced with enough people, then you can start to change and integrate and mix it with other things. But I agree with you. It is important to like have this little bit of compartmentalization or separation in your mind of the different things at first. Yeah. Even though, like you said, eventually they all become kind of the same thing. Yeah. But clients definitely don't like that answer, by the way. Yeah. This is kind of like a discussion between practitioners. Well, I also think it's important. It's an important thing to teach your clients, though, too, right? How many times do you get a client and it's like they're kind of one and done, right? They think this is going to be the thing that heals them, and they have one session and they don't get the results and they never come back, right? Like it's very important to have that conversation with them of it being a process. Like this concept of healing is definitely a journey and not a destination, right? This is something you're going to have to keep working with. And often with holistic wellness, as you know, things get worse before they get better. It's a very common thing. When you're, especially if you're dealing with internal issues like digestion, like lymphatic issues, like hormone imbalances, things like that. Yeah, and it's like just because people are used to buying this one product or one service, and we're having a hard time seeing things like with more shades and like solutions that might be more complex, like especially with diets, as you were saying. You get clients, oh, I tried this diet that didn't work, and I am supposed to lose weight doing this, or I am supposed to feel better doing this. And what they don't realize is that it will take you many months, like trying to figure out what are the things that work for you. And the bad thing is that there's no name for this diet. It just it's your personalized diet, your personalized eating. Your name is Michael. It's going to be the Michael diet, and people don't like it because it's not appealing. It's not like some branded type of diet it's not easy. It's not written down for them step by step, right? It takes a little personal exploration. It's so funny, Mamoon, because just before this interview, I had someone reply to a YouTube video I had made. And he told me he was trying this ketogenic diet, and he's lost like 17 kilos or something like that, but he's brutally depressed, he said. And so I wrote back to him, I was like, well, what was your initial goal? Was it weight loss? Or, like why, how can we find a balance now between this weight loss goal and your mental health? Because this is not a good side effect to have massive depression. Right now we've lost the idea of health and wellness again. And he wrote back, my goal is to be healthy. And so it's like, well, if that's your goal, we have to start to reconsider this diet choice, right? Just because it's fashionable and just because millions of people have amazing effects going on a ketogenic diet doesn't mean everyone will. And I think, I've done a lot of training with health coaching too. I went to the Institute for Integrative Nutrition, and that's kind of like the mantra there is like, what is one person's poison is another man's like miracle, and it's really true like that. And I think the study of nutrition is just such a modern science, and I just think it's the most controversial science. Like there's just so much we don't know. And again, I think it's just hard to replicate all the factors that affect humans in a lab. You just can't do it, Even if you got a sample size of 40,000 people, there's still so many factors you're not accounting for in that sample size, I just think it's really hard to test diets. There's too many other things influencing it. So I just think it's really interesting. And I do think it's fun you say that. But, people have to start their journey somewhere. So for him, he's starting to play around with his food and he's getting some effects, But now it's like that mental piece comes back. Well, okay, I got good physical results, but I don't feel good. And my goal is to feel healthy. So now where do I go from here? That's the journey, I think, for all of us. And I, as you're saying this, I'm realizing that I have a love-hate relationship with diets, just because whenever you pick up a new diet, like you go vegan, you go keto, you do this or that, you have way more consciousness when it comes to the food that you're eating. You actually like read the labels, or you actually like choose, okay, I'm getting this and that. So you put your intention in whatever you're eating. And I find like that's why maybe like
most diets, or like maybe like all diets, have some effects
Right.
initially in the beginning, because you put like more consciousness, and you choose
Right.
things that may be better than, or at least you eliminate processed foods, which is another
Right.
thing.
Which is
But
every diet, by the way.
yeah,
Yeah.
which is every day. I don't know about the processed food diets yet. Maybe this whatever soy milk thing that they're
Yeah.
selling. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I agree with you. Where your attention goes, energy goes, right? So it's like,
yeah,
of course, as soon as you pay attention to it, like I said earlier, it's like the treatment begins, you know? As soon
exactly.
as you have the thought, like, I'm going to choose to focus on this thing tomorrow, the treatment begins, you know?
Yeah,
Um, and so I think, yeah, I think just like really understanding, again, this idea of a process or a journey, and that every little step counts, you know? I think people are always focused on the big picture, and sometimes it can get defeating when they don't get results instantly. You know,
exactly.
so that's the other piece I've learned with time, is just to be more patient with myself and my process.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. And speaking of your journey with nutrition, so you had some issues growing up, and so what was your journey? How did you? What are the things you tried? Things that worked, things that didn't work?
Oh my God. You know, to be honest, I'm still in it. I think like you know, these like autoimmune things and these chronic digestive things, I think they're always there a little bit. There's just so many factors. So I've done everything. I did like the vegan, the vegetarian, I was a raw foodie for a few years. That was brutal. That was not good for my gut, but I thought it was going to be the best thing ever. I've definitely done the paleo thing. I haven't ever fully committed to the ketogenic diet, but I have played around with a bunch. I've definitely done really long fasts, you know, like I remember one year I tried just like a water fast. I think I didn't eat food for 21 days. It was crazy.
Oh wow.
It was crazy, and I wouldn't recommend it. So I started to feel like a little bit of organ shutdown, like I took it a little too far, I think.
Oh my God.
But in the beginning, it feels great when your norm is to be gassy and bloated and water retention and sluggish. That feeling of just being empty is like miraculous. It
Mm,
feels so amazing to be light, you know, like it really, this is part of like the name of my company, by the
yeah.
way. You know, it's be light on multiple levels, but that feeling of like, wow, people with
Sorry.
digestive stuff, yeah, go
I
ahead.
thought Belighttt was for light, as an actual light.
Both.
Okay.
You know, it's like everything. It's
Yeah.
on all the levels,
Yeah.
because when you think of like humans ascending more into their spiritual being, they are getting lighter, right? They are
They're
moving
becoming
more towards like
lights.
this photon level, right? You
Yeah.
know, like the physical matter is breaking up into more like tiny particles. So
Mm,
it's kind of supposed to be like the full human cycle when I think of Be Light.
okay.
Um, yeah, so I don't remember what I was talking about, but
Sorry, I
yeah.
interrupted you. So you were
It's fine. Oh, so the diets,
yeah.
yeah. And then what I've come to learn, I feel like personality plays such a big role in it, you know? So then, you know, I've always been kind of a shy, introverted person, and I tend to be solitary. I like to spend a lot of time alone. But, you know, when you're on a fad diet like that, it's hard to socialize, right? So I would find in the times when I would want to socialize, my food choices were getting compromised, right? And then I'd feel like I was sabotaging my efforts. And then like the self-punishment would come on top of me, you know? And so I think there's an aspect of when people choose to go for a certain diet too, like really giving yourself a little bit of allowance to make mistakes and fall off once in a while without that self-punishment, because that mental and psychological pressure just exacerbates your symptoms, right? It throws you into the stress response that you're trying to get out of.
Hmm.
Like that mental inner, that negative inner dialogue also has an inflammatory response in the body, right?
Hmm.
And so I found like I was getting stuck in that a lot. And so for me, it was about finding this balance of, do I have to be obsessive about everything that I'm eating? Like, do I really want to go through my life like this? Because I'm already a little bit of an OCD personality, and I know
Hmm.
that that too has a mental toll sometimes.
Yeah.
So can I find a balance between eating relatively well 80-90% of the time and balancing it with just socializing and having some emotional support around me so that I don't feel like a total hermit all the time, you know?
Hmm.
And so I think it's important to find that balance, and that is where I've gotten to at this age of like, I try to do my thing and eat well most of the time. And then, you know, when my boyfriend's around, he definitely sabotages what I'm eating. And when I go out with friends, it doesn't always work out perfectly. And I'm kind of okay with it because, you know, if there's laughter and love and hugs to kind of counterbalance the bad food choices, I feel okay with it at this age. You know, I feel like the inflammation is relatively in control. I don't get that. It's very rare that I'll get that horrible, debilitating abdominal distension that I used to get.
Yeah, that's interesting that I mean, you healed your gut issue, or maybe like not 100%, but you're managing it
Yeah,
by not just focusing on what you eat and by
right.
wanting to reduce the inflammation. But unfortunately, today, whenever someone is hurt somewhere, I have something in my finger, I'm just going to focus on it and try to
Right,
do everything to, I don't know, cut my
right.
finger or get rid of it, but we don't realize that it's coming, it's everywhere.
Deeper.
Mm?
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Yeah, I think, and then like, you know, my friends who do Reiki and work on more of the subtle body, they will tell you once it has manifested physically, that's like, wow, it went really far. Like if
Yeah.
we had just corrected this a little bit sooner with some just energetic work or whatever it was that had to happen, some emotional healing or even getting the anger out of your system, whatever it was, maybe this wouldn't have manifested into this concrete thing that you now have to deal with. I just think it's interesting.
Yeah.
And when you talk to practitioners across the board, I feel like that's a very consistent pattern that they see and that I've seen also and that I've experienced in my own body.
Yeah.
Because I also associate a lot of my gut issues. I know that the root cause also comes from really low self-worth. You know, like as a teenager, I didn't have a lot of friends and I felt really isolated and excluded all the time. And I know that that was part of the issue. And not being able to really verbalize my needs or communicate or have really strong friendships or strong bonds with other people, I know that that kind of perpetuated the negative symptomology for sure, without a doubt. And so that's why for me, it's been so important to focus on some of this emotional health aspect because I wasn't getting the results just focusing on the physical. And you have to pay attention to all pieces.
Yeah. And can you remember if like when you might have the answer, but like so when you were in these situations that are that you when you were feeling lonely or maybe like rejected a little bit younger, would you feel that like in your stomach, around your guts, or you feel like you're kind of shutting down?
Yeah, so
How
let me
does it
give you
feel
an
in your body?
idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, to think about it now or back then, what was the feeling? Or both?
Yeah, let's go for both. Yeah.
um, yeah, I mean, just to give you an idea, I was so shy throughout middle school and high school, and I had a few incidents of like forcing myself out of my comfort zone to try to like connect with someone and just getting shut down. And so for about 6 years, from 7th grade until I graduated high school, I would prepare myself in the morning, like so much pressure inside my body, like almost fighting back tears because I knew I was going to have to get through this 8-hour day in total silence, no one to talk to, so afraid of drawing attention to myself that someone might make fun of me or that I might move in a weird way that someone might make fun of. So I would go through school like a ghost. I'd like get my backpack, I'd run to each class as fast as possible. I'd always sit in the back corner of every room. I wouldn't talk to anyone. And by the end of the day, the pressure buildup inside of me was like ready to explode. I mean, it's just like, imagine waking up, well, now people pay to go on these Vipassana like retreats where they don't speak for 2 weeks, right? But back then, as a social teenager, it felt like a lot of pressure to mentally prepare, like, all right, here's another 8 days, not expressing yourself at all, not talking to anyone, like, here we go, let's just go for it. It was heavy. When I think back on how much I had to silence myself and shut down my voice back then, it just feels so restrictive. And so a lot of my healing has also been around finding the voice. What's funny is as a teenager, I really wanted to be a singer.
Oh, wow.
And I think intuitively, I was trying to counterbalance that lack of expression and that lack of vocal power that I had in my life. And, you know, we couldn't afford lessons and I never got around to it. But now just in the last few years, I've started exploring the vocal experience a lot more, and it's been very powerful for me to just be able to sing with abandon and not worry about what I sound like and not worry about other people's judgment. Letting go of that judgment piece is really big.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I think that fear of judgment, or fear of anything, but the fear of judgment is a really heavy weight to carry around with you. And there's no way you're not going to have a physical manifestation of some kind of disease or disorder carrying that weight around for decades. It's going to happen.
Oh yeah, I'm curious to know, how did you get back your voice? I have a personal story about this as well.
Yeah.
I wasn't, well, I was a lot asocial. Maybe when I was like really maybe like around the, maybe until the age of 4 or 5. But my whole
Yeah.
childhood, I'm like the quiet child. I don't speak to
Yeah.
anyone. I
Yeah.
don't want to speak to anyone. But I'm curious to know your story. Like, how did you get back your voice?
It's a long
Or
journey. I mean,
discovered? Yeah.
it didn't happen until my late 30s where I started to find this. So it's interesting. I had an opportunity to start teaching myofascial release, right? And I was doing that at the Swedish Institute. And so I think stepping into that role, like of teacher, was really helpful for me because I'd get to stand in front of a whole class of people and practice talking. So I think that was step one. And I felt actually very comfortable with it. I come from a long line of public school teachers, and I always said, I'll never teach. It's like you don't want to do what your parents did, but here I am, like I'm back in it, it's fine. So I think that was step one. And then from there, one of my students was, she was like a Reiki practitioner, but she's much more than that. She's kind of a shamanic healer, and she tends to work with like the darker, heavier energies. And one day I worked on her, and then she goes, I think I'd like to do a session on you. Do you mind? And I was like, do I mind? Of course not. Let's do it. And during this session, I hadn't told her much at all. During this session, she said she found a collar tied around my throat, that someone had tied a collar around my throat, and she energetically cut it off for me and threw it away.
Wow.
And when she left that day, she said, first of all, I've never seen this girl again since, by the way. She cut the collar off my neck. And she said to me, one word comes to me for you, and it's Kirtan was the word. I don't know if you know what Kirtan is.
No.
So I had never heard of it either. So Kirtan is like something that's very traditional in the Bhakti yoga tradition.
Okay.
And I kind of describe it as like Bhakti church, right? If you've ever seen Hare Krishnas, have you ever seen Hare Krishnas really singing? This is that tradition, okay? So the thing that's beautiful about the Bhakti tradition is that it's very inclusive, and any religious background is allowed in the room. And they hold these kirtans, which is like there's a little core group of musicians, and it's a call and response type of situation. And sometimes hundreds of people are in a room just calling and responding, and it gets really heated. There's a lot of drumming. People are like on their feet, bouncing around, and everyone is singing. And some people in the room are completely tone deaf, and they're still singing as loud as they can, and there's no judgment, and no one cares. And so I was going to these kirtans because I was like, this is great. Like, it really helped me lose my fear of judgment. It gave me a forum to sing out and let my voice be heard and let my voice be shared with all these other people. And now I'm not being singled out. Now I'm part of something. It's like part of a movement, So that was amazing for me, very helpful. And from there, I transitioned into learning a lot more like mantras and mantra meditations. And so I practiced those on my own, and I used to hold little groups where we just do vocal meditations and trying to encourage other people to share their voices. And I just came to love it. Once you lose the fear, it's just so nice to open up your voice. And then the other part of it is I also kind of go in and out of the capoeira community. And there's a huge musical and vocal element to capoeira. Right? I don't know if you've ever watched them play.
Yeah,
I've
tried a few sessions, and I was surprised that it was as important as the actual movement components.
Yeah, so they make this roda, right? And everyone learns every instrument, and everyone learns every song, and everyone is encouraged to sing because you're setting the tone for what's happening in the circle, right? It's like the vocal and musical vibrations are merging with the movement vibrations. And to me, it's such a holistic modality. I call it a modality. They would never call it a modality, but that's my framing of it, right? It's such a holistic movement therapy that combines every part of your physical body, your emotions are involved, your spirit is elevated. the vibrational level, I don't know how else to describe it, Mamoon. After you've been in a capoeira circle for like an hour, 2 hours, you are literally shaking. Like the vibration
Mm,
is so high. And you might have come in feeling exhausted and angry, and it just like all vanishes. So
yeah.
when I saw the power of like music and the voice to move energy like that so fast, like it just shifts your vibration. And the other thing I love about vocal meditations, or even humming meditations, is that if you're vocalizing, or if you're speaking, or if you're singing, you can't be in your head. It's almost impossible to hold a
Mm,
separate thought while you're doing something with your voice. And so for people who have a hard time doing a really silent, still meditation, I think the vocal practices and the mantra practice is so powerful because it just pulls you out of your head
oh
and it
yeah.
drops that mental chatter and that mental anxiety, which is the thing that people I think struggle with the most. I know I struggle with that.
Yeah. Yeah, we think that it works for everyone to just stay seated and not think of anything.
Right.
If you're already like in that quiet mindset, you
Yeah.
can do it for sure. But like I know for many people, it
Yeah.
works way better to like, as you're saying, either sing or like do like active meditation or like jump
Yeah.
around or like run. That's a
Yeah.
meditation too, but people don't see it
Sure.
as a meditation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. So that was kind of my vocal journey. What was your vocal journey?
Oh yeah, well, what a story. Well, I have a similar experience growing up, not speaking, not interested in talking to anyone, and I also have the gut thing that's a little bit close to you, but I never realized it when I was younger. So I had this anxiety whenever I talk to people, and how I protect myself is I always contract my abdominals
Yeah.
whenever something that I don't like, someone says something to me and I just don't respond. I just
Yeah.
shut
Yeah.
down and squeeze. And it lasted for many years until I started like working a little bit on my breathing and like try to
Mm-hmm.
release the tensions that I have in my stomach. And
Mm-hmm.
for the vocal part, it lasted until I was beginning of my 20s. So I
Mm-hmm.
would just like avoid, if I have like, even at school, if I have anything that I need to present to people, it's like my
Yeah.
worst nightmare. I'm like shit,
Yeah.
like stressed. And until my early 20s, I got, it was the beginning. I had like a depression and I started like working on myself, and it lasted many months. And the one thing that I because I was just like at a point where I don't care anymore, and
Mm-hmm.
you know when you hit that point where
Yeah.
you've seen the worst, and you just don't care anymore. Uh, and
That's
I
a beautiful place to be, by the way.
oh
That might be
yeah,
the best place to be.
oh yeah, exactly, because you're, especially like when you have this ego breakdown, you don't know who you are anymore. You just like you can't try anything, and you don't care. You don't
Right,
care at
nothing to
all.
lose. There's nothing to
Yeah,
lose.
there's nothing to
Yeah.
lose. And I was thinking of things that I'm most afraid of. I was like, okay,
Mm.
if I don't care, I can just try to do anything, and it shouldn't be scary for me.
Right.
And I started working in sales, like getting cold calling people.
Yeah.
And it was like, for me, it was like the scariest thing I could do. But when I had this breakdown and I started doing it, I started to realize like, what's the worst that can ever
Right.
happen? I get people get mad, and I just like, okay, bye. And you kind of disconnect with this like fear emotion, and you start to realize how unrealistic
Right.
your connection, the connection you have with this fear. And then I started to feel I started to see kind of the matrix. I'm like,
Mm.
what am
Yeah.
why was I so afraid to do this? And I started
Mm.
to push it a little bit further and further, and talk to more people, talk to strangers in the street.
Mm.
And you realize that the worst that ever can happen is someone telling you, sorry, I'm busy, I need to go. Like
Right.
that's the worst. No one's gonna tell you, go, leave me alone, or it doesn't happen.
Right.
People are
Right.
but I think that's what like opened my eyes, and now I do this podcast. I talk to
Yeah.
people I don't
Right.
know. I always try to talk to many people as I can, and I make a living doing this, coaching people. So it's like
Yeah.
using my voice. As a child, I would have never thought that it was
Yeah.
just possible, and for me, the color was I don't know how it started, but for me, it, it was aggravated with little
Mm.
things. And the more I don't speak, the more people tell
Yep.
me what's wrong with this child, the
Yeah,
more
yeah,
I don't speak. And
right.
I remember like I was maybe like 14 or 15. I was like a family reunion. I had like some aunts. I can't remember like who she was, but she was saying like, "Oh, what's wrong with this child?" I don't think he's gonna become one day a lawyer. And like these little things, they get they you start
There's
you
seeds
believe,
that burrow in. Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
you believe
Yeah.
them. And that's why I drew, I got like more attracted to like more readings, more like cerebral things.
Hmm.
I studied in finance and like
Yeah,
get
right.
and avoided anything that's gonna put me under the spotlight. But yeah, like the one thing that really opened my eyes, that I was just bullshitting myself and there's no such fear. I mean, it
Hmm.
exists, the fear exists, but you can destroy it like so easily by just seeing that it's actually not too bad. And people, and one thing that like really opened my eyes is like people are so egocentric. People are,
Yes.
everyone thinks so much about themselves. They don't have time to actually judge
Right.
you.
Yes. Yes. This was the biggest breakthrough for me too, that
Yeah.
exact same thing. Exact same thing. Because think about how much self-awareness you had back then and how much self-consciousness, and think about the other 20 people around you are feeling exactly the same way.
Yeah.
And they're spending 90% of their day replaying all the scenes that happened and trying to change the outcome mentally, you know, of
Yeah.
something that already occurred that they can't change. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's big, but that's big stuff because that really affects all of us. It keeps us in that mental prism. And
Yeah.
that's what you call those self-limiting beliefs. You know, they are self-imposed. But
Mm.
sometimes they're fed to you like by your auntie who said this kid will never be a lawyer, you know, like, you know, we're assaulted by words all day and
Yeah.
you don't know which one is going to settle into your subconscious mind
Hmm.
and grow like a tree that now it's a big problem and it's affecting my life and I have to face this thing, and how am I going to uproot this tree from my subconscious now because it's a big problem. So having that awareness is key. And I also think it's like, I know I'm super guilty of this, but how we talk to each other is so important. And I think in child rearing, it's so important, the vocabulary that you use and the words that you use with your kids, because
Hmm.
you just don't know what it's going to leave them with, what impression it's going to leave them with, and how those word seeds are going to manifest for that child, you know? It's just
Yeah.
really interesting. The subconscious mind is so unpredictable and so fascinating to me.
Oh yeah. And also how you speak to yourself.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Well, so now you're bringing that up. It's like I've always, and you're probably guilty of this too. I have a feeling. I think a lot of people that get into holistic wellness are, but I've always been my worst critic and always the hardest on myself more
Mm.
than anybody. And it's like I think some of that came from, you know, like I'm gonna reject myself before people have another chance to reject me. Like I can at
Mm.
least be in control of my own rejection, you know? So
Hmm.
if I have like a weird physical thing or like some tic that's obvious or a weird habit, like I'll make fun of it out loud first so everyone knows that I know that I'm weird and they don't get to call me weird. You know? And so I think we play that game with ourselves, but that inner self dialogue, I mean, mine was brutal for decades, and that was also really keeping me stuck and really keeping me sick. And so
Mm.
now I'm just so much more accepting of my flaws and so much more easily able to laugh stuff off,
Hmm.
um, and joke around with myself and even look in the mirror and be like, you know, Tara, I love you. Don't worry about it. It's fine. You know, and it took a long time to get there. You know,
Mm.
changing that inner self-talk is something that only really happened for me in the last 3 or 4 years. And that was a huge part of that emotional resolution. And
Mm.
again, like really calming that inner anxiety. Yeah, I think it's so big. The inner self-talk is so big.
Yeah. And how do you deal with this inner talk? Do you just watch it? Do you find ways to change the trajectory? You see something coming, you try to. How do you deal with it?
So to be honest, I had a lot of coaching around this.
Hmm.
You know, I was never someone who read like the self-help books. I was never into like that spiritual section that much. Not because I didn't believe in it, but I feel like I had a lot of friends who would read so many of these spiritual books and nothing ever changed in their lives. Like they never seemed to get better. They were always working on the same problem. So I just like had a little bit of cynicism around it.
Yeah.
And then I made the move to make a very big change in my life very drastically. And I think that was the catalyst for something big to manifest for me. And so what happened when I decided to make that big change is like this angel fell into my life. He's kind of a coach of sorts, right? But he's just so unbelievably knowledgeable about metaphysical stuff and quantum energy, and he really talks this quantum energy level and like the particulate matter that's going on inside of us, right? So he really talks about like beliefs and emotions as like a physical matter in the world, right? And I worked with him for over a year, and he just like blew my mind open, like he really got me to question every belief I ever held. Where did it come from? What was the root source of it? Okay, now you know the root. Can you see that it's ridiculous? Like, can you change it now? Can you pull it out? Can you be done with it so that you can expand and so that you can share yourself more fully? So I actually don't get a ton of negative self-talk that comes up for me anymore. I've done a lot of processing around it. Every once in a while, I'll kind of like joke around with myself, like, oh, you're so dumb, I can't believe you did that. But it's always very lighthearted. So yeah, I do try to change the trajectory of it whenever I feel a little something negative coming up. And if not, and if it's something big comes up and I feel like, wow, you really went into a negative space right now, that's when you go to your other tools. So for me, like doing the mantra meditations really helps me. Getting out my tuning forks and like literally changing the frequency of my environment helps me. Things like that really make a difference. It just like shifts the energy. And as soon as you shift the surrounding energy, your perception shifts.
Yeah, I see. And I feel like it's, we invite this kind of inner talks and this kind of energies when there's nothing inside. Like, how you have like an empty space, no one is in there. Well, you're inviting whatever is around you, your environment, you're just picking everything. And I think that might be like, that's why it's interesting to have, fill this space with something else. And if everything is full, if it's full of love and like, just having this peaceful state of mind, well, you can't invite anything else. You just, I
love that idea because in the nutrition world, we call it crowding out, right? Like, as opposed to me telling you, like, Mamoon, you can't be drinking coffee anymore. You have to stop drinking coffee. Like, you're going to be like, well, screw you. I like coffee. I don't have a reason not to drink it. Instead, I could be like, Mamoon, I think you need to start drinking more water. Here, why don't you try drinking this much water per day and just see what happens? And the hope is that the person's going to start drinking the water, feeling more hydrated, feeling more alert, and they're going to naturally wean themselves off of the coffee, say, as an example.
Yeah.
And so what you just described to me is like a psycho-emotional, like crowding out, right? It's like you're filling yourself with so much positive emotion that now those negative emotions can't take as strong of a foothold in your body. I kind of like the idea. It's pretty cool, actually.
It reminds me of the old school kind of advice. Like how we have a lot of, like younger people, millennials, we have a lot of mental issues like depression, anxiety, and all of that. And you get this 60, 70-year-old grandpa who just tells you, oh, back in the time, I didn't have any of these problems. But the reason why you didn't have these problems is just like you're so busy doing all this stuff, like helping your father in the farm and like doing this. And you're so busy that you're not inviting anything else. I'm not saying that's the best advice for someone who has depression to just like make themselves busy the whole time. But it gives an idea of how you can fill that space, and if you don't feel it, something else gonna do it.
Yeah, it's super interesting. I had a friend, and I've actually dated a few people with chronic depression, and I always thought like I almost thought like it's like a rewiring that has to happen in that primitive brain, And I always thought if they like helicoptered themselves in to an area where they just had to deal with their survival for the next 2 weeks, that they would have such a
Oh yeah.
massive mental breakthrough. Because now it's like you're back to like, okay, I need to eat, I need to hydrate, and I need to sleep, and I need to not get eaten by an animal in the woods, right? And so it just flips a different switch in your brain. I think in our urban environment, we just, in some ways, we're too catered to, we're too comfortable. You know, there's too much convenience. And so it almost allows us the leisurelyhood of, you know, just indulging in negative thoughts once in a while just to do it.
Yeah.
And I'm also not trying to diminish depression. I know how debilitating that is for people, so I don't want anyone to misunderstand what I'm saying. But I do think there is sometimes like, like you could do like a mental reset maybe. I mean, I think that's the whole idea even behind plant medicine now, and like the ayahuasca and the psilocybin and things like that. I mean, people are really looking for that reset. They're kind of stuck in their patterns, you know?
Mm-hmm.
For me, it's all about pattern interruption. And I think for you too, you were talking about this recently.
Yeah.
Right. And at the core of Belighttt, when I conceived of it, it was all about pattern interruption. What are your movement patterns? What are your postural patterns? What are your sleeping habits? What's your behavioral pattern? What are your thought patterns? Your emotional reactivity? How do you typically react in a situation?
Yeah.
You know, let's break it up, you know, and change it, because some of those patterns are not serving you. Which ones aren't serving you, and how can we improve them? And so I think that has a lot to do with it, this idea of, wow, we're just a collection of patterns. You know, it's crazy.
We become the patterns.
We become the pattern. Yeah.
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 And I do that with my clients. Like, we're used to doing this kind of squat, and they're like, oh yeah, okay. And they get used to it. We add more weights like 1 week after the other, and then just like switch it in a way like, what the fuck? Like, why are you doing this to me? I'm like, yeah. Well, and it's just little things. People get so comfortable in one pattern or the other, and then you see them like, although like I haven't change the way they were using, or like I'm even decreasing the way they're using, but they're just changing the movement just a little bit, and you see they're struggling and vibrating, and like they have to think about like, how should I place my foot, how should I put my arm, and and you see them awake, because if let's say you have a training program, you do the same thing over and over. And I think that's what happens for a lot of people who just find the program online and they just do it for 3 years, which is like the worst thing you can do, because it becomes as if you're just like walking, or you just become, you can do the training and like think about dinner and plan things for tomorrow, and like you're not in the training, you're not like feeling every movement.
Well, it's your brain's tendency to find the simplest way to do something, right? So if you're doing it the same way all the time, now you don't have to think about it. And so your neuromuscular system and your proprioception suffer, right? You're not challenging those things anymore, and so you're not getting adaptation. And so that's everything when you're talking about training, right? What adaptation are we creating? And with breathwork too, it's a lot of that. What adaptation are you creating? Like, why are you doing this technique? What are you hoping to accomplish? So I think that idea of adaptation has to be kind of at the forefront of everything we do. I'm glad you're doing that with people. Very cool.
Yeah. So that's going to be our transition for breathwork, I guess. I titled the podcast, well, just the video here, Breathwork Benefits.
Oh shit! And we've been talking.
Yeah.
We've been talking for an hour and we haven't talked about breath yet.
Yeah. It would be a bad idea to finish the podcast now. Yeah, I have all the time. I'm not in a hurry. So let's dig into breathwork. So what's your what brought you to breathwork?
Well, I love what you said before, because you almost segued for me about a half an hour ago. When you were talking about, as a little kid, you felt your response when people would say something that hit you the wrong way. You felt your whole abdomen clench, right?
Yeah.
And you even said yourself you had to start digging into the diaphragm and breath techniques to get that to release. And so the thing that really appeals to me about breathwork is that you really are approaching the physical, the emotional, the mental, and the spiritual body simultaneously. To me, it is like the modality that just like connects all the dots. And I think, and the other reason it appeals to me so much is like, it's so primal and foundational to our entire experience of being human and of being alive, right? It's like, Mamoon, like, look at us here talking. Like, what is the thing that differentiates us from someone who we would say is no longer living? I mean, it's this breath that's coming in and out of us. It's this exchange of gases that we're having with the natural environment around us. Right? It's what connects all of us. in a very literal way. You know, like, who knows if we've breathed in some of the same molecules in our lifetime? Like, carbon dioxide coming out of you, maybe it's wound up in me somehow. You know,
Right.
like, it's a weird thing, but it's like, this is the gases. The environment is constantly moving around the globe. We're sharing air with everyone around us. So I really feel like breath is the thing that binds us all in a very palpable and measurable way, which is interesting to me. And I love that you only need your nose and your diaphragm. You know, it's free. You know, and sometimes I think healing modalities get overwhelming because to get a practitioner is very expensive, or it requires a lot of equipment, or it requires a lot of space. And so it's very appealing to me to be able to offer people something that they need no equipment to do, that they can get really great benefits with very simple practices, and totally free. Anyone can experience it. So to me, that's powerful. It's so empowering. Oh, yeah. You know, like, as practitioners, you don't want people to be reliant on you forever. That's not a healthy relationship, to have that dependency. You really want to empower them to be independent in making health choices for themselves, and being able to feel into their body and figure out what's working and what's not working, and be able to modify accordingly. So for me, the breath is so powerful in that way. I also started to transition into it. You know, in traditional Chinese medicine, they talk about breathing a lot. And I found on my journey, doing different forms of Qigong and Tai Chi and yoga, I was always interested in the breathing, but I'd only ever gotten like a rudimentary understanding. And I don't know if it's because maybe we have, maybe like things like yoga have gotten too diffuse in the Western world right now, and maybe people are a little more focused on the movement aspects of it. And even though every yoga teacher will tell you to focus on your breath, there's not a lot of instruction about how to modulate it, or why you're modulating it, or what is really happening physiologically. And maybe this is my own fault, but I just never found a teacher who was really like focusing on the breath work. And I was so interested in it because it always felt like a missing piece for me. And also, it's part of that journey out of the physical more into the psycho-emotional, right? Like, I've done the lifting the weights and the like crazy movement patterns with the gymnastics and the dance and the capoeira, and I love all that, but it's like, what else is there? What's the balance to all that physical work? And I really think breathing is it. So what do you want me to talk? What should I talk about?
No, keep going.
So my first steps into finding now like a formal, like choosing a formal breath style and like studying with a teacher is very different than what I'm doing now. So my first introduction into more of like a formal system of breathing, besides like the pranayama, was a breathwork that was much more focused on the psycho-emotional experience, right? And so my teacher, she's been doing this technique for 40, 50 years, and she gets unreal transformations to happen with people in terms of letting go of anger, finding the voice, being able to communicate differently, being able to maybe move on from toxic relationships where they're feeling abused, things like that. And I've seen just unbelievable outpourings of emotion, but she also knows nothing about anatomy and physiology. And that's fine. Like, that's not her thing, you know? And so for me, it's been interesting as I start to explore different types of breath work. I see like, oh, wow, it's like, there's just so many things you can do with the breath. And so there's a couple schools of thought, I think, so far that I've discovered. There's the people who are into the breath work because they're more interested in this psycho-spiritual experience or this emotional release experience. And that's going to look very different. It's a very different style of breathing. And then there's the people who are much more interested in the anatomy and physiology, and they want the scientific evidence, and they really want to know, okay, I'm going to breathe at this cadence. What exactly is that doing for me? You know, they don't want to think about what it's doing. They want to know it's doing this, right? And both of those schools are fine, you know? And so I play around with both. So for about 3 years, when I had my office still, I was doing more of this psycho-emotional breath work, and it was fun. It was so interesting because I would be doing hands-on work at the same time. So I would be like going into their diaphragm and like working on their throat and like trying to open up the chest as they're doing the breath work, and they're getting more and more expansion. The ribs are moving better. And I've had some trippy things happen. Like, I can remember one guy, his wife had died really early on when she was only in her 40s, and he had never been able to find forgiveness for it. He always blamed himself in some way for it. And I swear to God, Mahmood, I swear to God, during our session, I watched this man sit up straight and have a full-on conversation with his wife who had passed like 20 years ago.
Oh,
And
wow.
I watched this conversation happening. I'm not even making this up right now.
Oh my
And he
God.
came out of that session saying, Tara, thank you so much. I'm not doing anything. He's doing all the work, but I like created a space for him to do it. Tara, thank you so much. It's like I thought I had forgiven myself, but today was the first time I ever felt forgiveness, and I actually heard her say that she forgives me and that I can move on. Like, how crazy is that? That's fucking crazy. Anyway, so, but I think it's because it puts you into an altered brainwave state. It puts you into an altered mental state and allows you to tap into things in that subconscious level that you just can't access in your waking mind, right? It allows you to just alter your state just enough where you can access different information that's always there, but it's just not visible to you normally. And so that work is really beautiful. Now, when we went into the shutdown, I tried transitioning that work into an online forum, and I just found it was not as effective and also more challenging to manage. That work can get very emotional, and if you're not, am I losing you?
Yeah, I think there's an internet thing
Oh,
going
shoot.
on. Hold on.
Okay.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Are we back? I can hear you. Can you
Yeah,
hear
I think we're
me?
back. Yeah.
So in doing that type of work, it's a little more challenging in an online space because you can't really hold a safe container for people, which I think is so important when you're doing kind of more emotional release work. And if they do have some kind of outburst, it's very common for people to start crying hysterically or even screaming in some cases. You don't know what's in there, If you're not in the room with them, that can be maybe more traumatic than good, So in the past year and a half or so, I've been focusing more now on the physiological types of breath work. I think they are more important for people on the day-to-day. Like, how can I be breathing every day for just like my general health and my longevity and my fitness, right? And also, a breath work where you're having a massive emotional release like that's not easy to do in a public place. You're not going to do that before you go on stage to speak to 200 people, So there's something very practical about doing these more physiological styles of breathing, where there's a direct application for your day-to-day. Like even before I came on the interview today, I never did an IG live. I was like, let me slow down my breath. Let me activate my parasympathetic nervous system a little bit. Let me slow down the heart rate. So I'm probably talking a mile a minute, but I was like, try not to talk too fast. But it makes a big difference. So I think overwhelmingly, most people are struggling with mental anxiety, mental chatter, kind of insomnia, can't think, overactive mind, and the anxiety. And so when you have these breathing styles that can really directly affect those things in a measurable physiological way, I just think they're more applicable, and it's something that I enjoy teaching in an online space much more. But there's definitely a time and space for both. And we were talking about bio-individuality before. It's important for people to explore, I think, a wide range of practices. And I think when choosing a breathwork style, it's really, really important to get clear. What's your short-term goal? What's your long-term goal? Really, what is your intention for even attempting this practice? Are you just curious? Are you looking to really resolve something specific? And then, breath is powerful. I mean, it's a huge physiological modulator. So there are some contraindications. You got to be really clear about what is your current health profile. Is it okay for me to be doing this breathing practice right now? And I'm excited to see people getting so excited and interested in the breath work. And I'm happy to be in that community at this time when it seems to be kind of exploding. And I think there's so many people doing such excellent work. And then I think a lot of us are well-intentioned, but need more education. I know for a while I was kind of in that boat with the breathing of still kind of exploring and experimenting and not having a really good rooting in the like hard physical scientific evidence, And now I've corrected that significantly, but I still have a lot to learn. I think we all do. The research has popped up and down for centuries, and then it just like disappears. There's like lapses in breath research. But I think now with this global respiratory infection, I'm hoping people are going to get more savvy about it again and start putting like concrete scientific evidence behind it. Because even though a lot of us, especially in the holistic realm, don't need that scientific evidence, I think a lot of us rely more on anecdotal experience and anecdotal evidence. How does it work in a real life population? I think it's important for the consumers to like have them buy in. It's nice for more of that analytical mind to be able to see like, oh, there really is value here that's been proven. It just appeals to a different mindset, and I think it's nice to appeal to both of those mindsets. I don't know what am I saying right now?
Oh yeah,
ask me a specific question.
These are the best answers. I'm just letting everything flow, and that's great. That's amazing content right here. Yeah. Well, to be more specific, let me ask you a more specific question. But so you launched your new online program, which is super exciting. So how do you do it? Like you were saying, like it's a little bit challenging. The online aspect, like you're not here to hold space for people. How did you structure your program? What are the ways you found to make it effective and like to be close to the people doing your program?
All right. So honestly, there's a lot of transitions and evolutions happening right in this moment.
Yeah.
So in the beginning, so last year when we first went into shutdown, I had combined that more intense emotional breath work. I just shortened the sessions a lot. So in my office, I might do an hour of that, right, and really push people. Whereas I would just shrink it down to maybe a 10 or 15-minute session. And what I was doing last year, I created a program called Unleash Your Light, where the breath work was more of the supplement to the mindset work. And it was a mindset and breath work program. And I have a new version of that on my website, but membership is currently closed. I'm going to open it again later this year. But that's a really nice way of presenting it, where you're doing specific self-inquiry, specific self-reflection, working on a very specific topic, and then using just a little bit of that more psycho-emotionally guided breath work to try to find the answers for yourself, right? So that breath work is more about self-inquiry, and that's how I've kind of done the work around there. And I've given people a lot of safety precautions for themselves and things to feel for and ways of using their hands to kind of elicit a stronger response if they want to. I'm working on that. Yeah, go ahead.
Is it more of a type of guided meditation? You're like guiding them through.
I guide them the whole time. Yeah. I guide them the whole time. So it's pre-recorded, but I try to be on top of it as much as I can, and I try to make myself available for questions. I think sometimes people don't believe it in an online business. Like they think it's like there's no real person behind there. So whenever I can, I try to tell people I'm a real person, and I really encourage people to reach out to me directly and ask questions. Like I don't want you to feel like you're on your own. It's not my intention. I want you to evolve the best you can, because when you're transformed, everyone around you is transformed. And that's the ultimate goal, is that ripple effect, right?
Yeah, and even if it's a video, your energy is there, and you were there recording the video, thinking about people that are gonna take your program. So there's a connection, even if it's not at the same time. There's a connection that you're gonna be having with people doing it. Yep.
And then the other thing I just released this last week is a free Breath Basics 6-day challenge, which you can find on my website. And this is much more the physiological breathing, but I think really awesome for stress reduction, for the mental anxiety, and for insomnia. I think it's really helpful for people, but it's so basic. So every day you get access to one 15-minute video, and there's a brief lecture, like what's this breath technique that we're doing today? What are the primary benefits? How are we going to do it? And then a fully guided 5-minute session. So I made it really short, really accessible, so that people can just get a taste of it and see that even in 5 minutes, you can have a really powerful physiological shift. Like changes happen. So I'm hoping that gets people more interested to ask more questions. And that free training also comes with I made this 20-page manual for people. So if they don't have time to go back to the video, which they have lifetime access to, they can like do a quick, like, what is this breath work good for again? So I really list out all the benefits for people and how to establish a practice on their own. And then on my YouTube channel, I've just been I launch one video per week now. And it's been growing. I've got maybe like 1,500 people now subscribed to my channel. It just started to blow up last week for no reason. I have no idea what it is. I wish I knew the secret to why it started to go. But so I get a lot of comments, and I really encourage people to ask questions. And I've been getting some amazing, like super smart questions. And so that's another really good place, actually, to have the back and forth. So I release one video a week. Sometimes it's a guided breath session. So it's just a nice way for people to get free sessions if they want. Sometimes it's like a brief anatomy and physiology. I like that stuff. And I think it's important for people to understand it. Yeah. And some people, it helps them to, it gives them a stronger reason to do the breath work if they understand it in their own body. And so that's mostly what that is. And then I actually have an announcement that I was hoping to put up on your podcast in case any of your followers are interested.
Yeah.
So I'm actually finishing up my advanced instructor certification right now with the Oxygen Advantage. And I don't know if you've ever heard of the Oxygen Advantage, but they're awesome. So this is an awesome style of breathing, which in one half of it is everything we talked about, working with the anxiety, the insomnia, the stress. But the other side is really for sports performance, physical performance. So there's like high altitude simulation training in there. There's a lot of breathing for increasing CO2 tolerance, a lot of training for delaying lactic acid release and fatigue and breathlessness when you're working out. A lot of work for improving aerobic capacity. So I really love this work because it can be modified to very specific populations. And then it can also be a huge driver for increasing sports performance. Not that you're a pro athlete even, but even like people who train with you, you know, they just like love to work out. And how are we going to improve their aerobic capacity in ways where they don't always have to be lifting heavy or going on miles and miles of runs? Can they do something in their own living room that just requires their breathing and still get a remarkable benefit? So in June, I'm looking to start 2 groups. Each one will probably run for 3 weeks. It'll be online. So I'm looking for people who are more in that category of anxiety, stress, insomnia. So the people looking for more stress reduction techniques. And then I'm also looking for a group, and you could join both groups if you want, who are really interested in this idea of delayed lactic acid, delayed onset of fatigue, increased aerobic capacity, things like that. We're a healthy population. So no serious medical conditions in that one, where we can kind of push it a little bit and experiment. And I also need to do a few case studies, actually. So if anyone wants to work one-on-one for free for a few weeks, please DM me or, you know, contact me however you want. Everything's in my bio. But I would really love to start working with people and experimenting with some of this newer stuff that I haven't had a chance to guide people through as much and really get our feet wet together. So if anyone's interested, please let me know. I'm excited to start running those groups.
Yeah, that's super awesome. And do these techniques require any equipment, or is it just breath-based?
So because there's so much scientific evidence for those techniques, some people use like it's called I'm going to grab it, okay? Don't go.
Yeah.
Don't go anywhere. I'll be right there. It's right here. Hold on. Okay. I'm back. So we do use this pulse oximeter, which is something you put on your finger. I don't know if you've ever seen one of these. And it measures like resting heart rate, and it measures your blood oxygen saturation.
Yeah.
You don't need one. It's just more fun if you have one because it's like very visual. You can see the results with your own eyes. And so for some people, it's more of an incentive again to keep going, but you don't need the equipment at all. If you happen to have one of these, cool. And if not, I can teach you the exercises. You could always buy one eventually, or again, you can just feel, do I feel different?
Yeah, that's super awesome. And what do you, like, speaking of equipment, what do you think of all the biohacking stuff, like people doing mouth tapping, or I know some people, in order to simulate like a run in the mountain, they would restrict oxygen or stuff like that. What's your input?
Yeah. So, so the mouth taping, I think, is actually really important for people. And the effect is pretty great. And I've only done it a few times. I'm not historically a mouth breather. And I don't wake up with the symptoms of mouth breathing that much, which is like extreme fatigue, very dry mouth, those types of things. But I am going to start trying it more often just to see if it helps me with my alertness and my cognitive functioning during the day and sort of my controlled energy levels across the day. I think mouth taping is critical if you're a mouth breather, for sure.
Mm.
You got to get your mouth closed at night. I mean, the higher incidence of sleep apnea and cardiovascular illnesses down the line is enormous. So I think it's really important, actually. In terms of so with Oxygen Advantage, there is a sports mask that you can use. I haven't played around with it much yet because honestly, if I have to be fully transparent, I'm deconditioned from 2020. Like I am not in prime shape at all. So, and the mask is an intense training, right?
Yeah.
That's really like, you're ready to compete, you're a top athlete, and you want to push it that extra little bit. It's a lot. That breath deprivation is a lot. What that mask does is it's really acclimating you to elevated levels of CO2 in your blood. That's what that mask is for. The thing that, excuse me, the thing that simulates high altitude training and gets that type of adaptation is the breath holds. Strong breath holds while exercising. And that I believe in strongly, and I have been practicing, and it's awesome. Like, it's really awesome. I love it. So I think there's a place for all of them, but I'm not very techy, and I don't like to have a lot of equipment, and I don't like people to feel like they're required to buy a lot of stuff to do something that's free, like breathing. So I invite people to buy it if they really respond to that type of thing. If they really like, people who have like the heart rate monitor and they're measuring their HRV every morning and they want to know if their vagal tone is improving and all of these things. They have a lot of devices on at night. It's measuring their sleep cycles, how many hours did they spend in REM, like all those types of things. I don't have a lot of them, but I think there could be value to it if that's how your mind works, right?
Yeah, I feel.
What do you think? Yeah.
Yeah, well, my thinking is like all these tracking devices, and we do a lot of tracking. We track our calories, we track our whatever performance, we track how fast we run, how we sleep, and all of that. And I think it could be a good transition, especially someone who's just not in touch with his body at all, and he has no idea what he's eating. Like sometimes I get new clients, like, how many calories you eat, like more or less per day. I'm like, oh, I don't know. Like, do you know what you're eating? Oh, I don't know. And people, when you're not in touch at all, it's a good transition where you like take down, you take notes, and you use an app where you can put your whatever you're eating, how you're sleeping, and all of that. And it kind of creates a pattern where you're like more aware of the things you do on a daily basis. And but it shouldn't be used every time.
As a crutch.
Because it becomes, as you're saying, it becomes a pattern, and you just write down whatever you're doing, and you forget about it like the second after, and you just like write. You can have like an idea of like how fast you're performing, or like how you're evolving, but it doesn't. You're not gonna get this connection with what's happening in your body. If I use that as well in the beginning of my journey. I use that as well to keep track of what I'm eating, like for example, for calories. But I kind of built an awareness of the things that I eat. And you can tell me, and I tried that. I tested that like a few months ago, and I was like, okay, let me estimate today how many calories I ate, how many carbs, protein, and fats I ate today. And I did like a rough estimate, and I put it down in the app, and it was like really, really similar.
Yeah.
But it's just because I developed this awareness when it comes to, and I can tell you exactly how much I slept. I wake up in the morning, I know what time it is, like really close to what time it is, because I know like how rested I feel, what time I went to, but that too, because I'm a really geeky, and I love numbers, and so I kind of have an awareness for this type of things. So we don't have to be that extreme, but I think if they're used as a transition, and then you slowly remove the crutch and listen to just listen to what your body is telling you, and you won't need any of this equipment.
I mean, I think that's the whole premise of, what is it called? Like neurobiofeedback, right? Like those biofeedback techniques are that, it's like, oh, wow, I'm watching my heart rate go up now. Oh, I'm watching my heart rate go down. I can feel, now I can align this visual with what I'm feeling, like you said. So it is a good learning tool, I think. And some people, it's nice to have that. But I agree. Like my whole premise too has always been like, okay, if I'm dropped in the middle of the woods, or there's an apocalypse and we all have to start living off of nature again, like how are we going to do it? Like, do we really want to be reliant on all of these devices and like electricity and having to make sure this thing is charged before I go to bed because I need it tomorrow?
Yeah.
Like, so that reliance on the technology is for me scary, but I'm like a little bit of a, what we call a Luddite. Like I'm like a little hesitant with technology. Like I like natural living, but I do think it holds its place, and I think it has tremendous value for certain people. And so I don't bash it. I think it's kind of cool, and it's nice to see the numbers, I think. Yeah. And if that's what helps you to progress, then I'm all for it. Yeah. Like I don't judge people for that.
Yeah, and it gives you an idea of what the numbers are supposed to be. If let's say you feel that, okay, how am I feeling now? You look, you see on your app, on your Apple Watch, oh, it says my heartbeat is at 76. And then you make, as you're saying, you make the connection. When I feel like this, it means 76. If it gets a little bit faster, it's maybe like 90. And then when the next time you feel a little bit faster, you go, okay, I'm at 90. Maybe I need to like relax and
slow down.
Slow down a little bit. If you don't have any idea, like, oh, this is like fast, this is slow, and you don't see like the spectrum of the possibilities. So it could be, it's an interesting tool, but not to be abused.
I think great for people with no body awareness. I don't know what your client spectrum is, but I know in the manual therapy world, I'll have clients come in and I'll do a full intake form and they'll get on my table and they'll be like, oh yeah, by the way, I just got hit by a car on the way in here. Like people are not always in their body. Like they forget things that happen to them like a day after it happens. Oh yeah, I had this concussion last week, by the way. Oh, well, that's good to know. Like they just like, sometimes we forget things, and some people are not as in tune with the subtle kinesthetic experiences and those little proprioceptive experiences that others are. So it's a good way for improving that level of intelligence, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was thinking, in order to give like the listeners a little idea of the breathing techniques that you do, shall we do just like one example, one of the techniques you're using? Maybe you can do it together and have people that are listening, they can do it at the same time.
I figured you were going to ask me this, actually.
We have a connection right here.
So this is what I'm going to say about breathing. Sometimes the simplest techniques are the best, and it doesn't have to be so overcomplicated. And I really want to drive home for people, like, don't overcomplicate it. You were meant to breathe, and you were meant to breathe a certain way, and just like connect with that and feel how that is in your body. So let's just do that's so basic. Let me tell you why we're going to do this one a little bit. I don't know. Are we like really pushed on time? I feel like we've been talking a long time. You still have a little bit in you?
Oh, I'm good for another half an hour. If you need, tell me if you're in a hurry. No. We can make it short, but I'm okay.
Well, we'll just do like 5 minutes or so. So let's just do a very basic 4 to 6 breaths. Okay, which means 4 seconds to inhale, 6 seconds to exhale. I'm sure everyone has tried this breath. So when you're doing either a 5 to 5 or 4 to 6 breath, we kind of call this coherent breathing. And so this is the breath style that has just unbelievable benefits and has been researched the most, actually. So it reduces our breath rhythm, right? So most adults are breathing anywhere between 10 and sometimes up to 20 breaths per minute. That's a lot. That's a fast breath.
Yeah.
And when you're breathing fast like that, it tends to be shallow in upper chest, right? And so the diaphragm is not getting activated. And what happens is most of your blood is in the lower lobes of your lungs, right? So if the oxygen is not getting into that blood, your gas exchange is compromised, you're not taking in oxygen, and it's not getting into your tissues. When you slow down your breath to 6 breaths per minute, which is what a 4-6 or a 5-5 breath is, you're naturally reducing that breathing rate. You're naturally taking the nitric oxide that pulls up in your nose, and you're more slowly bringing it down deep into your lungs. And one of the benefits of that nitric oxide is that it redistributes the blood in your lungs. So now you have more places in your lungs that can actually do gas exchange, where that oxygen can enter the bloodstream, which is critical, right? The slower you breathe, the more you start to acclimate to elevated levels of CO2. The CO2 starts to build up when the exhale is extended longer than the inhale. And the benefit of having a little bit of an elevated CO2 in your body is that it causes vasodilation, so the blood vessels expand. You have better blood flow to all your organs, and you actually allow the carbon dioxide is the trigger that allows the oxygen to come out of the red blood cells and enter the tissues. So if there's not sufficient carbon dioxide in your environment, the oxygen stays in the red blood cells, it won't come out. And now your tissues are being deprived of that oxygen. Your brain is being deprived of optimal oxygen. Your heart is being deprived of optimal oxygen. So this whole thing around elevated CO2 is about getting more oxygen efficiency to the places where you need it.
So you're saying that we need to get rid of more CO2 or that would be the opposite.
Mm-hmm. So when you're getting rid of more CO2, that's hyperventilation, right? So if you ever see people, and there are breath styles like this, the breath style I was teaching before is like this. This psycho-emotional breath style tends to be sometimes open mouth. Wim Hof is a hyperventilative style of breathing, right? There's a hyperventilation before a long breath hold. If we start talking about all the differences, it's going to be another 2 hours. But the point is hyperventilation is blowing off CO2 fast, a lot of it, right? Yeah. So when you can allow for more CO2 to build up in the blood, when you don't blow it off as fast, when you slow down your breathing, even though you feel, your body at first might read it as feeling like you're starved for air, because carbon dioxide is the signal to breathe. So the more that the carbon dioxide raises, the more your brain is like, we got to breathe because we got to blow off the CO2. If you can suppress that urge to breathe, there's actually tremendous benefit to having a slightly elevated amount of CO2 in your blood because you get more oxygen to the places that need it, the tissues, the organs, the muscles, the brain. So it's pretty cool. And then slowing down your breath rate like that too also really helps to balance the autonomic nervous system. So you're really finding this balance between the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. And this is really what we're talking about when we're talking about heart rate variability. Is my heart able to respond in an instant to changes in my breath, to changes in my environment? You know, so when people are talking heart rate variability, it's really how adaptive are you to your immediate environment and how quickly can your physiology shift to accommodate that environment. So it's so simple, guys, but this breath technique it's awesome. The benefits are awesome. It's so easy. So let's just go for it.
Let's do this.
Breathing in and out of your nose the whole time. And when your mouth is closed, try to keep your chin parallel to the floor and try to imagine the tip of your tongue is on the roof of your mouth right behind your front teeth. And just keep it gently pressed there. So don't let the tongue float around in the mouth. And whenever you're doing your breathing, just try to keep an erect spine, right? So crown of the head up towards the ceiling without creating tension, just trying to create a nice neutral spine. And when you're ready, you're going to come in through your nose, 2, 3, 4. Nice slow exhale out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and in, 2, 3, 4, out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, in, 2, 3, 4, out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Breathe in, 2, 3, 4, and out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. In, 2, 3, 4, and out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Breathe in, 2, 3, 4. Breathe out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And in, 2, 3, 4, and out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Breathe in. Try to keep the count in your own mind so I can give you a couple cues. In for 4 and out for 6. As you're breathing, try to keep your body upright. Try not to rock back and forth. And as you breathe in through your nose, see if you can feel your lowest ribs expanding out to the side. You can even put your hands on your rib cage if you like. And on your inhale, you can feel your ribs going out. And exhale, ribs coming in. In for 4, 2, 3, 4. Out for 6, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And in, 2, 3, 4, and out. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Again, in. 2, 3, 4, and out. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Keep going on your own count. And now my next cue is try to keep your chest totally still. Can you get the breath to lower into the lowest part of the rib cage? Can you get the diaphragm to expand more? And now don't change anything, but shrink the amount of air that you're taking into your body. So as you breathe in, you barely feel the hairs inside your nose move. And as you breathe out, you barely feel the hairs inside your nose move. Slow breath, breathing in. 2, 3, 4, and out. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and in. 2, 3, 4, out. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 2 more. In. 2, 3, 4, and out. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Last time. In. 2, 3, 4, and out. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Good. And rest. One of the other benefits is that you are really starting to activate that parasympathetic nervous system. So you want to notice, is my mouth getting more saliva in it? Am I feeling warmer in my body? Right? Am I feeling a little drowsy maybe? Or just like my mind just like really slowed down? And just noticing the effects. What do you feel? And really taking in how basic this is and how simple it is for anyone to do this, and what a powerful tool it can be when you're having a hard time falling asleep, when you're having a hard time with your nerves before a big performance, whether that's sport or speaking or whatever it is. I just think it's simple and so profound. And I don't know how we got away from it as humans. It's like, we didn't used to have to teach people how to breathe, you know, but I think all the emotional buildup, that all the emotional layers have kind of suppressed the movement of our diaphragm and made us all much more constrictive. And just the general lack of movement during the day too just really affects how our diaphragm activates and integrates with our body.
Oh yeah. I'm gonna have a hard time finishing the podcast. I feel like having a nap, feeling so relaxed. Like I feel everything is so relaxed, but it feels really good. And
but so simple, right? I mean, there's more details to it, but just to start, I mean, that's like something anyone can do anytime. That 4 to 6 breath is so good, in and out through the nose, and then just really trying to slow it down, almost where your breath becomes imperceptible. So it's not a big movement, you know. It's really like, can you isolate it to this area, right? Really getting that diaphragm to move.
So this 4 seconds inhale, 6 seconds exhale, that's something you recommend someone who, as you were saying, someone who has a presentation, you just want to feel a little bit anxious, a little bit stressed at the end of the day. Can you give like examples of other techniques for different situations? So for example, I used to play rugby, and you want to be pumped up before going in, and there are many. Are there like other things that you use to activate more the sympathetic?
Right.
Sympathetic
Great question. So that's the other way I would say is a good way to start getting your mind around classifying different breath techniques. There's usually a style that's going to be more conducive to activating the PNS, and then there's going to be something that's more of a stressor, right? So whenever you're hyperventilating, that's a stressor. And whenever you're holding your breath, that's a stressor. So that's where the breath holds come in. I would not do this before going on the field, actually. You see how you're too relaxed? It's a little too relaxed. You might do this a little earlier in the day just to get rid of some of the mental nerves. But before you go on the field, you're going to want to do some mild breath holds. You might even do some very strong breath holds. So usually I would start teaching people breath holds with movement. But to warm up the breath holds very easily, breathe in through your nose, breathe out through your nose, hold your nose, hold your breath for 5 seconds, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then just breathe normally for about 10 seconds.
Why do you recommend moving while holding your breath?
So our body perceives naturally that elevation in CO2, which happens when you hold your breath, as part of movement, right? That's usually what forces us to shift into more anaerobic, right? We're not getting enough oxygen. So we're used to feeling that elevated CO2 and that air hunger when we're moving. So in some ways, it's easier on us mentally. Like if you just do a static breath hold, it can be challenging because it's a meditation and you get fidgety and your mind is like, oh my God, am I going to do it or not? So in some ways, the movement is a distraction. But also, if you're training for sport, you're simultaneously warming up your body and getting better blood flow to the limbs, to the muscles, to the organs. And also, you can increase the effect if you add in movement. So as the air hunger starts to get harder or more challenging to take, if you increase the movement even more, so like we'll do breath holds during sprints, right? If you increase the movement even more, the CO2 is elevating even more, you're holding your breath even more, and now you're getting a much stronger effect. You're getting a stronger vasodilation effect, you're getting more oxygen to flood the tissues. So it's just really awesome.
Yeah.
And this process of the breath holds, I mean, it does a lot of things. It also causes because you're creating a hypoxic state, a low oxygen state, your spleen actually contracts and releases more red blood cells. So that's advantageous right before a rugby game, right? To have more oxygen carrying capacity in your blood. I guess it doesn't work for everybody, but for a good part of the population, regular breath holds like that, strong breath holds, will also cause your kidneys to release EPO, which is like the doping hormone that people used to take, right? But you can naturally release it to create more red blood cells. So the regular breath holds is also about EPO release. Again, trying to create more red blood cells. This is the high altitude simulation training, right? You're trying to over oxygenate your blood, really saturate it with oxygen. And that's how you get it, is breath holds with movement. You get strong spleen contractures, you get the kidneys to contract. It's really cool. There's a lot of research on it. I can try to link to more of that for you guys too.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I've always did it statically.
Which is great too.
Yeah.
So you'll get it. So if you can hold your breath even, I think they say one breath hold for even just 30 seconds is enough to make the spleen contract. But the more you can push it, the stronger you can get an effect. Within limit, by the way. Like it's an exhausting exercise. So 3 strong breath holds and maximum 5 strong breath holds. Otherwise, it's like diminishing returns. You're exhausting yourself. Yeah. So it doesn't take much. 5 strong breath holds a day consistently is huge for replenishing the blood and giving you more oxygen carrying capacity in the blood. It's awesome.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
It's magic right here.
Well, and then there's like more crazy science, but they've also shown that it helps to delay the onset of lactic acid to create that really elevated CO2 with the strong breath hold. Because the adaptation that comes from it is that I guess you create more buffering in the muscle compartments itself. So you just don't feel that burn of the acidic environment. Which is great. I mean, if you're a real pro athlete, or you know from playing rugby, because it's such like a combination of endurance and power, you know, and soccer would be similar, you know, like that's such a huge advantage to not get fatigued so quickly and to not feel that muscular burn so quickly, you know, and to not have that breathlessness so quickly.
Right.
It's an awesome advantage to have that increased aerobic capacity.
Yeah. And I also wanted to ask you, what do you think of like moving in general while breathing? I know like I've seen like some breathing techniques, and I was doing it, and you were telling me to stay tall, but I feel like I do it like intuitively. Whenever I inhale, I go like this, and I exhale. And I've seen like some breathing techniques where people like really go, and they move a lot more, and like with qigong, we're just like moving and breathing. Are these techniques, what do you think of these techniques in general?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a lot of criticism, honestly. Again, especially if things have been around for thousands of years, who am I to say like, oh, that's garbage? Of course, that's great. I mean, I was a dancer, right? And I think as an athlete too, you're always breathing with movement. You can't separate them. And if you're really, I mean, so I don't know if you've ever had a serious injury. I've been pretty injured, pretty bad. And, you know, when you have a postural distortion, a lot of it could be your diaphragm position or your breathing pattern is affecting your posture or distorting your posture and preventing you from getting full stabilization and full balance and full, well, spinal stabilization, which is critical for any athletic endeavor. So I think always combining breath with movement is essential. And I think a lot of times it happens naturally, but it could be optimized, right? And I didn't mean to like give you a hard time for that. I wanted you to focus on expanding your diaphragm without movement. I love to move during breathing too, because for me, it helps me to really open up my muscles better. I'll stretch and do my breath practice at the same time sometimes, right? So I'm okay with it. But for today, I wanted you to feel your diaphragm really moving away from your rib cage and coming back up, as opposed to getting into this luxurious snake-like movement, which feels good. I know it does. And it's okay. I actually find most breath techniques easier on your back with your knees actively bent and your feet planted. It just puts your spine in such a neutral position, and you don't have to like hold yourself up. Because even sitting up, you have to use your spinal muscles, your postural muscles to hold yourself, which I think just naturally limits your capacity of your diaphragm to move a little bit. There's always this little bit of holding. So I really prefer people to lie down when they're practicing. I just think it's easier when you're first learning to find your diaphragm. I think it's really comfortable and much easier to get that expansion. And I don't know if that answered.
Yeah, it does. And I think again, it's always about like breaking this pattern we were talking about. And if I'm used to moving, going in a snake-like movement, well, I need to try something else and always like breaking. If you're always static, try to explore something different. Otherwise, you just won't know what it feels like to do it in the different way. Maybe if you do it differently, you might, as you're saying, if I stand tall, might be like opening a little bit more, because here I'm like avoiding the air, getting in this way, and I'm just like kind of going with the breathing. So yeah, just play with different options.
Yeah, you change the pattern, you change like your mind and how it reacts to it, right? Yeah, I think it could trigger some new awareness for you that you didn't have before. Yeah.
Well, I'm really loving this conversation. We can go for hours and hours, but we'll have to keep on doing what we do.
Yep, for sure. For sure. This was awesome. I can't tell you how much I appreciate coming on today, and thank you for taking so much time to talk to me. And I hope this was valuable for you and your listeners.
Oh yeah, it was great. We should have done the breathing in the beginning, though, I think.
We lost them. They came on. They're like, "This is not breathing." We got a little distracted, I think, but that's okay.
No. What I mean, like, we should have done the breathing, actually, like breathing together, as opposed to at the end. Like now, I'm just feeling like so much more relaxed. I'm like, I can go. But it was great. It was great. I really enjoyed talking to you. I think. Just before we finish this, I'm gonna ask you a few last questions.
Okay.
Yeah. So, waking up, when you woke up this morning, was there anything that you were grateful for?
Yeah, I was grateful to come on the show today. This is so awesome for me. You know, like I haven't done too many interviews, and I just felt like such an immediate vibe with you, and I was really excited to do this interview and like talk to you. I feel like I could talk to you forever, and we have so much in common and a very similar mindset about how we see things. So I woke up really excited about it, actually. And I was really grateful for the opportunity to come on and talk, and also to learn the technology of an Instagram Live. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Well, I'm happy. I'm really happy. We're sharing the same the same thing. Yeah. Likewise. Well, that's great. And my second question, what's your best mistake?
Oh my God, I feel like I probably mentioned a couple already, but what was my best mistake?
Not the worst, your best, but it could be the same thing.
So when I first came out of college and I was going through that depression and the real debilitating IBS issues, I actually had like a normal job for a while, like an office job, which I am not suited for in any way. You know, like I can't sit all day, hate being in the, anyway. So, and I did it for a couple of years, and you know, I've always been like the good girl and the obedient one who does everything right. And my boss did something that irritated me so much, and I wrote like an email to the entire office about it. And she found the email, and I got fired. But actually, what I had to say, she appreciated, and she appreciated it, and she knew I wasn't wrong, and so she allowed me to get on unemployment, and that's when I transitioned into my massage therapy career. So it was like the catalyst to finally say goodbye to that type of life and really officially move into this holistic career path, which was awesome.
That's great. I love it. Yeah.
And that's this pattern interruption, right?
Yeah.
I have noticed that the few times in my life where I've really done something so out of character has manifested just unreal changes for the better, always.
Oh, yeah. Know? Oh, yeah. Totally agree. Yeah. Well, that's great. Yeah. I'm glad that you've had these experiences at the time where they happen. It's like the worst thing that could ever happen. That's why it's we're saying mistake, but it's the best mistake. So that's like what's changing everything now. Of
course. Yes. 100%. 100%.
That's great.
Yeah. And it really, that's set the new mental pattern actually that I really, anything, even when it seems extremely negative or so dramatic, I really have that clarity now of like, this is going to manifest into something. I want it more. I just didn't see it happening in this way, you know, but I know that something better is coming now. And I can really read negative situations that way now, which I am so grateful for. That change in mindset is huge.
I'm happy for you.
Thank you.
Well, yeah, Tara, so I'm going to share your website. Where can people join you? I guess, is it better to go on if someone is interested by your program? Is that on your website or?
It's not. I haven't even announced it yet. I'm going to start the in-person live programs in June, and I'm just kind of putting together the details. So if someone's interested, DM me, and I'll be putting up announcements on Instagram this month.
Great.
And otherwise, everything's on my website, and you know, I put a lot on my YouTube channel once a week. You can get the link in my bio in my IG.
Yeah, I'll put everything in there. You can find it in the description. And I wish you a wonderful day, and I will stay in touch. Yeah, it was great.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. Have a great day.
You too. Bye. Take care.